The morning that changed the Pacific. December 7th, 1941. 7:48 a.m. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The sky is impossibly blue. Sailors aboard the battleship USS Arizona are finishing breakfast. Coffee steams in metal cups. A bugle call echoes across the water. It is Sunday. Slow, warm, predictable. Then the first explosion rips through the harbor. A low drone becomes a scream as Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters tear across the sky. Red circles flash under their wings. Torpedo bombers skim so low their shadows skip across the water. You can almost feel the concussion in your chest as the first torpedo slams into USS Oklahoma, flipping steel and men into chaos. Smoke swallows the morning. On Ford Island, sailors stare upward in disbelief. Some think it's a drill. Others freeze. Anti-aircraft guns sit locked, ammunition sealed away. By the time the realization hits, this is real, it is already too late. On the bridge of the Japanese flagship hundreds of miles away, the man who orchestrated this watches the clock. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto does not cheer. He does not smile. He understands something most of his countrymen do not. Surprise is powerful, but it is fleeting, and he knows exactly who he has just struck. Yamamoto had studied in the United States. He had walked the streets of Washington. He had toured American factories, endless conveyor belts, rivers of molten steel, assembly lines that never seemed to end. He once warned Japan's leadership that he could run wild for 6 months. After that, he made no promises. Now the 6 months have begun. Back in Pearl Harbor, the Arizona explodes in a thunderclap so violent it lifts the battleship out of the water. 1,177 men vanish in a fireball. Oil spreads across the harbor, igniting the sea itself. Men swim through burning fuel. The attack lasts less than 2 hours. 8 battleships are damaged or sunk. Over 2,400 Americans are dead. The Pacific Fleet is shattered, or so it seems. In Tokyo, celebrations erupt. Newspapers print triumphant headlines. The Imperial Navy has done what no one thought possible, crippled the United States in a single surgical strike. But Yamamoto sits quietly, because he knows what others ignore. They have not destroyed America's aircraft carriers. They were not in port. They have not bombed the fuel depots towering over Pearl Harbor. And most dangerously of all, they have awakened something vast. The next morning, December 8, 1941, Washington, D.C. President Franklin D. Roosevelt wheels himself into Congress. His voice is steady but cold. A date which will live in infamy. The chamber erupts in applause. War is declared, almost unanimously. Across the country, something shifts. Factory whistles that once marked ordinary shifts now signal urgency. Recruitment offices flood with volunteers. Men who had argued against involvement in a distant war now line up for uniforms. Yamamoto's gamble was built on one assumption, that America, shocked and bloodied, would negotiate. Instead, it hardens. In Detroit, auto plants begin quiet conversations about converting to tanks. In California, aircraft designers pull blueprints from drawers. In shipyards from Virginia to Oregon, welders prepare for something no nation has ever attempted before: total war. And the man who predicted it all watches the Pacific grow darker, because he knows what is coming. Not revenge, production. And production in America is a weapon unlike any battleship. The attack on Pearl Harbor was tactically brilliant. Strategically, it may have been the spark that ignited an industrial giant. But giants do not rise overnight. First, there would be fear. There would be defeat. There would be months where Yamamoto's warnings seemed wrong. because for a brief moment after Pearl Harbor, Japan would look unstoppable.
6 months of lightning. December 10th, 1941, South China Sea. 2 British capital ships, HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse, cut through gray water under a low, heavy sky. Their crews scan the horizon for a threat they cannot see. Then the sky fills with aircraft. Japanese torpedo bombers descend in tight formation, engines roaring. There are no British fighters to protect the fleet, no radar warning, no mercy. Within hours, both ships roll beneath the waves. For the first time in history, modern battleships steaming at sea have been sunk entirely by air power. The message echoes across the Pacific like a drumbeat. The old rules are dead, and Japan is writing the new ones. Hong Kong falls before Christmas. Manila trembles. In January 1942, Japanese forces storm into the Philippines. American and Filipino troops retreat to Bataan. Supplies dwindle. Disease spreads. General Douglas MacArthur stares at maps he knows are bleeding red. February. Singapore, the Gibraltar of the East, collapses after just 1 week of major fighting. 80,000 British troops surrender. Winston Churchill calls it the worst disaster in British military history. March. The Dutch East Indies fall, handing Japan the oil fields it desperately needs. April. Japanese aircraft carriers strike the Indian Ocean, sending British ships to the bottom. Everywhere you look, the rising sun advances, and in Tokyo, the celebrations grow louder. To many Japanese officers, Pearl Harbor has proven something undeniable. The United States is slow, hesitant, soft. They point to the burning ships in Hawaii, to the humiliations in Southeast Asia, to the retreat at Bataan. America cannot match our spirit, some say. But Admiral Yamamoto does not measure wars in spirit alone. He measures them in steel. Detroit, Michigan, early 1942. The River Rouge plant, once devoted to automobiles, begins its transformation. Conveyor belts that once carried chrome and leather now transport armor plating. Ford engineers study tank designs with the same precision they once gave carburetors. Women enter factories in numbers never seen before, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back. The country will later call them Rosie the Riveter. But this is not propaganda yet. This is necessity. The War Production Board issues directives with relentless urgency. Civilian car production stops almost entirely. Refrigerators, typewriters, even toys disappear from shelves as materials are diverted. You can almost hear it, the rhythm of rivet guns replacing the sound of jazz drifting from open windows. America is not retreating, it is retooling. Meanwhile, the Pacific burns. April 18, 1942. 16 B-25 bombers roar off the deck of the aircraft carrier USS Hornet. Led by Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle, they skim over waves toward Tokyo itself. The damage is minimal, but the psychological shock is immense. Japanese civilians who believed their homeland untouchable watch bombs fall on their capital. For Yamamoto, the raid confirms his deepest fear. The United States is adapting faster than expected. And he knows the carriers that launched that raid are still out there, waiting. May 1942, the Coral Sea. 2 carrier fleets clash without ever seeing each other. Aircraft arise, attack, return, or don't. For the first time in history, naval combat becomes a duel of floating airfields.
Japan loses the light carrier Shoho. The fleet carrier Shokaku is damaged. Zuikaku loses much of her air group. It is not a decisive defeat, but something subtle has changed. Japan's momentum, that unstoppable surge, has slowed. And Yamamoto decides to force the issue. He plans a bold strike at Midway Atoll, hoping to lure out and destroy America's remaining carriers for once and for all. If he can shatter them now, perhaps negotiations will follow. Perhaps the industrial machine will never fully awaken. But he is gambling again. And this time, the odds are shifting. Because while Japan prepares for Midway, something invisible is already working against them. In a quiet room in Hawaii, American codebreakers lean over intercepted messages. They're solving a puzzle. And the solution will determine whether Yamamoto's 6 months of freedom become his final months of advantage. The storm is gathering.
The day the tide turned. June 4th, 1942, 4:30 a.m., North Pacific Ocean, 240 miles northwest of Midway Atoll. The sea is steel gray. Wind lashes the decks of 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. Flight crews move with rehearsed precision, wheeling bombs into place beneath rising sun insignia. Engines cough to life. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto is miles behind the carrier strike force aboard the battleship Yamato, the largest warship ever built. He believes he is about to deliver the decisive blow, the one that will finish what Pearl Harbor began. But he does not know he has already been seen. Inside a cramped intelligence station in Pearl Harbor, Commander Joseph Rochefort adjusts his glasses. For weeks, his code-breaking team has worked around the clock, deciphering fragments of Japanese naval communications. One code name keeps appearing, AF. They suspect it means Midway. To confirm it, they send a false message from Midway claiming a water shortage. Soon after, Japanese transmissions report that AF is short of water. The trap is set. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz positions his carriers, USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and the hastily repaired USS Yorktown, northeast of Midway. Yamamoto thinks he is the hunter. He is sailing into an ambush. 7 a.m. Japanese aircraft roar toward Midway, striking runways and hangars. Smoke rises from the atoll. The attack seems successful, but not decisive. The American base is damaged, not destroyed. On Akagi's deck, ordnance crews begin a fatal shuffle. The first wave reports that a second strike may be necessary. Bombs are removed, torpedoes are brought up. Then a scout plane radios in a chilling update. American ships have been sighted. Again, the weapons are changed. Bombs back on, torpedoes down. Fuel lines snake across crowded hangar decks. Aircraft sit packed wingtip to wingtip, loaded with explosives. A single spark would be catastrophic. 10:22 a.m. High above the fleet, dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown break through scattered clouds. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey leads the charge. They have been searching for hours, low on fuel. Then, almost by accident, they spot a lone Japanese destroyer racing to rejoin the fleet. They follow it. Below, Japanese carriers are distracted by torpedo bombers flying at wave-top height. Anti-aircraft guns are angled low. No one is looking up. You can almost feel the moment stretch. Then, the sky splits open. American Dauntless dive bombers plunge nearly vertical, sirens screaming, bombs release. On Akagi, a direct hit ignites fueled aircraft. On Soryu, flames rip through the hangar deck.
On Akagi, a single bomb pierces near the elevator. Enough. Within minutes, 3 carriers are burning uncontrollably. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo watches the decks become infernos. The pride of the Imperial Navy, veterans of Pearl Harbor, are dying in smoke and twisted steel. Only Hiryu remains operational. She launches counterstrikes that cripple USS Yorktown. But by late afternoon, American dive bombers find her too. She burns into the night. 4 Japanese carriers lost. Over 300 aircraft destroyed. Hundreds of veteran pilots, irreplaceable, gone. Aboard Yamato, Yamamoto receives the reports in fragments. 1 carrier damaged, 2 aflame, 3 lost, 4. Silence settles over the flagship. The 6 months he promised are ending not with dominance, but with devastation. Midway is not just a defeat, it is a hemorrhage. Japan's naval arm, the elite corps that executed Pearl Harbor, cannot be replaced quickly. Training a carrier pilot takes years. America, meanwhile, is accelerating. Even as Midway is fought, new carriers are sliding down slipways back home. Essex-class hulls, Independence-class light carriers, dozens planned. Yamamoto understands the arithmetic instantly. Japan can win battles, America can replace fleets. And for the first time since December 7, 1941, the balance has shifted permanently. The hunters are now cautious, the prey is awakening. But Midway is only the beginning, because while the Pacific Ocean absorbs the wreckage of burning carriers, something far larger is happening across an entire continent. Shipyards are multiplying, factories are expanding, airfields are rising from farmland. The industrial giant is not just stirring, it is standing up.
The giant finds its feet. July 1942, Richmond, California. Welding torches flare against the night. Sparks rain down like artificial stars as a Liberty ship hull rises from scaffolding. The air smells of hot steel and salt water. Men and women work in synchronized motion. Riveters, crane operators, machinists, their faces streaked with soot. There is no applause here, no headlines, just output. Henry J. Kaiser walks the yard with quiet satisfaction. He is not a naval officer, not a traditional shipbuilder, but he has introduced something radical, mass production to the sea. Prefabricated sections arrive by rail, already measured, already welded. Instead of building a ship piece by piece, they assemble it like a machine. What once took 230 days now takes weeks. Soon, it will take days. Across the continent in Willow Run, Michigan, another miracle is unfolding. The B-24 Liberator bomber, massive, complex, heavy with turrets and bomb bays, begins rolling off the line at a rate no one thought possible. 1 per day, then 2, then more. Automobile engineers apply assembly line logic to warplanes. Wings arrive from one facility, fuselages from another, engines from a third. Everything converges in rhythm. You can almost hear it, the mechanical heartbeat of a nation shifting gears. American aircraft production in 1941, roughly 19,000 planes. In 1942, nearly 48,000. And climbing. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, Japanese forces dig in. Guadalcanal becomes a meat grinder. August 7, 1942, U.S. Marines storm ashore, sweat mixing with sand and cordite. The airfield they seize is renamed Henderson Field. For months, the island becomes a brutal back and forth of night naval battles and jungle fighting. Japanese commanders still believe superior training and fighting spirit will compensate for losses.
But something is changing in the sky above Guadalcanal. Each month, more American aircraft arrive. Each convoy grows larger. Each carrier task force becomes harder to challenge. Japan's logistics strain under submarine attacks and fuel shortages. Pilots lost at Midway are replaced with men trained in months, not years. The edge is dulling. Back in Washington, the numbers begin to stagger even seasoned observers. The United States produces 300,000 aircraft engines, thousands of tanks, hundreds of thousands of trucks, entire fleets of destroyers, submarines, carriers. The Liberty ships multiply so quickly that German U-boat captains in the Atlantic report something surreal. They sink ships, and more appear. It feels endless, because it almost is. America's geographic safety allows uninterrupted production. No bombs fall in Detroit. No artillery shells land in California shipyards. The homeland hums without fear of invasion. And that security turns into volume. Volume turns into dominance. Tokyo, late 1942. Admiral Yamamoto studies situation reports by lamplight. Fuel consumption projections, aircraft loss charts, industrial output comparisons. He knows the numbers are no longer in Japan's favor. Even victories now come at a cost too high to sustain. He once warned Japan's leadership about American industry. He had seen it firsthand during his time in the United States, the skyscrapers, the factories, the scale. Now those memories feel less like warnings and more like prophecy. The war he hoped to end quickly is becoming something else entirely, a war of attrition. And in attrition, production decides fate. By 1943, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. Essex-class carriers enter service one after another. New fast battleships, improved radar, long-range P-51 Mustangs dominating skies in Europe, freeing resources in the Pacific. Japanese shipyards cannot keep pace. Skilled labor shortages grow. Raw materials tighten under Allied submarine pressure. The balance has flipped. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but decisively. And Yamamoto knows time is no longer his ally. The industrial giant he feared has not just awakened, it is marching. And it is coming closer to him personally. Because soon, the war will take a turn he never expected. Not at sea, not in a fleet engagement, but in the sky, hunting one man.
The message that sealed his fate. April 14, 1943. Pearl Harbor. Intelligence office, basement level. A radio operator removes his headphones slowly. Another intercepted transmission. Routine at first glance, scheduling, inspection plans, minor logistics. But as cryptanalysts begin reconstructing the Japanese naval code, a detail emerges that freezes the room. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto will be flying to the Solomon Islands. Exact time, exact route, exact aircraft. The architect of Pearl Harbor has given the Allies something priceless: predictability. Commander Edwin Layton, Nimitz's intelligence officer, reads the decoded message twice, then a third time. This is not rumor. This is not estimation. It is precise. The opportunity is almost unbelievable, but it carries enormous risk. Acting on it would confirm to Japan that their codes have been broken. It could compromise every advantage gained since Midway. The decision rises to Admiral Chester Nimitz. He does not hesitate long. The order is given. The mission is approved. April 18, 1943, 7:25 a.m., Guadalcanal. 16 P-38 Lightning fighters sit on the runway.
Their twin booms glint in the early sun. Each aircraft is fitted with extra fuel tanks. This will be an extreme-range interception, nearly 1,000 miles round-trip over open ocean. Major John W. Mitchell leads the formation. They lift off in silence. Low altitude, radio silence, navigating by stopwatch and compass alone. You can almost feel the tension in the cockpit, the vibration of the engines, the endless stretch of water below. If they miscalculate by even a few minutes, Yamamoto will pass unseen. Timing is everything. 9:34 a.m., near Bougainville Island. Two Japanese Mitsubishi G-4M Betty bombers appear on the horizon, escorted by Zero fighters. Right on schedule. Mitchell signals the attack. The P-38s climb sharply, breaking radio silence with gunfire. Tracer rounds rip through the sky. Captain Thomas Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber dive toward the lead bomber, Yamamoto's aircraft. The Betty tries to descend into the jungle canopy. Too late. Bullets tear through its fuselage. The bomber rolls, trailing smoke, and disappears into the trees below. The second Betty is also shot down. The escorting Zeros scramble, but the ambush is swift and precise. Within minutes, it is over. Yamamoto, the strategist who understood America better than most of his own countrymen, lies dead in the wreckage. News spreads cautiously. The United States publicly claims it was a lucky patrol. Privately, they know what it represents. This is not just retaliation, it is a symbol. The war has shifted so dramatically that the mastermind of Pearl Harbor can be hunted down with mathematical precision. Japan mourns, but more importantly, Japan adjusts. Because Yamamoto was not merely an admiral, he was one of the few who grasped the scale of what they were facing. His death removes a voice of realism inside the Imperial command, and the industrial giant continues forward, unchecked. By late 1943, American shipyards are launching so many vessels that convoys stretch across oceans. Submarines choke Japanese supply lines. Carrier task forces roam with increasing confidence. The balance is no longer theoretical, it is visible. In fuel shortages, in inexperienced pilots, in shrinking fleets, and in the realization that Pearl Harbor did not cripple America, it mobilized it. But the final proof will not come from a single battle. It will come from scale, from numbers so vast they redefine what war even means. And by late 1944, the numbers become overwhelming.
When steel became strategy. June 6, 1944, 3:30 a.m., English Channel. The horizon is gone. It has been replaced by silhouettes, thousands of them. Destroyers, transports, battleships, landing craft, an armada so vast it seems to merge with the curvature of the earth. Engines rumble in low, constant thunder. Soldiers grip rifles with salt-stiffened hands. Operation Overlord is underway. While this is Europe, not the Pacific, the meaning is global, because the same factories feeding the Pacific War are now flooding the Atlantic with steel. America is fighting on two oceans, and still accelerating. Back in the Pacific, something equally immense gathers. June 1944, the Philippine Sea. Admiral Raymond Spruance commands Task Force 58, 15 fleet and light carriers, hundreds of aircraft, modern radar-guided fighters, and anti-aircraft systems refined through years of combat. Across the water, the Imperial Japanese Navy attempts one final decisive engagement. They still believe in the doctrine that shaped Pearl Harbor, one crushing blow to break American will. But this is not 1941.
American pilots are better trained. Radar screens glow in combat information centers. Fighters launch before Japanese aircraft are even visible. What follows becomes known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Wave after wave of Japanese aircraft approach. Wave after wave is cut down. Over 300 Japanese planes are destroyed in a single day. Pilots who survived Midway, Coral Sea, Guadalcanal, the veterans, are now mostly gone. Replacements lack the hours, the experience, the instinct. You can almost hear the imbalance in the air itself. Engines screaming, radios crackling, and then silence as wreckage falls into the sea. Meanwhile, American shipyards are launching Essex-class carriers at a rate Japan cannot comprehend. The USS Essex, USS Intrepid, USS Yorktown, a new one, not the one lost at Midway. Each vessel bristling with aircraft, radar, anti-aircraft guns. By 1944, the United States has more fleet carriers in the Pacific than Japan has remaining experienced pilots. That is not strategy. That is inevitability. In Tokyo, reports become harder to read. Fuel reserves are critically low. Merchant shipping is vanishing under relentless submarine attacks. American submarines, built in numbers that dwarf Japanese production, now prowl sea lanes without fear. Japan's industrial capacity cannot replace what is being lost. The asymmetry Yamamoto feared has matured into catastrophe. October 1944, Leyte Gulf. The largest naval battle in history erupts in chaos and desperation. Japanese forces attempt a complex, multi-pronged assault to disrupt the American invasion of the Philippines. It is bold, it is intricate, it is doomed. American forces, fueled by logistics that stretch back to untouched factories thousands of miles away, absorb the blows. When the smoke clears, the Imperial Japanese Navy is effectively shattered as a fighting force. The once dominant fleet that stunned the world at Pearl Harbor is reduced to fragments. Ships remain, but power does not. And yet, the industrial machine does not slow. It expands. By 1945, American production numbers are almost surreal. Nearly 100,000 aircraft in a single year, thousands of ships, tanks, trucks, ammunition in quantities so vast they overwhelm ports. While Japan scrapes together resources for desperate measures, including kamikaze attacks, America is fielding new weapons entirely, weapons that will change the nature of warfare itself. But before that final chapter, one truth stands undeniable. Pearl Harbor did not break America. It clarified it, it unified it, it mobilized it, and it unleashed a scale of industrial warfare the world had never witnessed. The question now is not whether Japan can win, it is how the war will end, and at what cost.
The weight of what was unleashed. August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m., Hiroshima, Japan. The morning is clear. A single B-29 superfortress, Enola Gay, glides high above the city. Inside the bomb bay rests something born not in desperation, but in capacity. The Manhattan Project. 3 years of research, over 130,000 workers, entire secret cities, Oak Ridge, Hanford, Los Alamos, built almost overnight. Scientists, engineers, machinists, uranium refined in unimaginable quantities. Only a nation operating at full industrial stride could sustain something this vast in total secrecy.
The bomb falls. 43 seconds later, the sky becomes white. Then, fire. 9 days later, Emperor Hirohito addresses Japan by radio for the first time in history. His voice is distant, formal, restrained, but the meaning is unmistakable. Japan will surrender. The war that began for America in smoke over Pearl Harbor ends in stunned silence. In Tokyo Bay, September 2, 1945, the battleship USS Missouri rests beneath gray skies. Allied representatives gather as Japanese officials sign the instrument of surrender. Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz stands nearby. General Douglas MacArthur presides. The deck is steady, calm, controlled. 4 years earlier, the Pacific had burned with surprise and humiliation. Now it is quiet. Somewhere in memory, in an earlier time, Yamamoto's warning echoes. He had told Japan's leadership that he feared awakening a sleeping giant. He had studied at Harvard. He had traveled across the United States. He had seen factories that stretched for miles. He understood scale. What he underestimated was not America's strength, it was America's reaction. Pearl Harbor did not fracture the country, it fused it. Isolationist debates evaporated, political divisions narrowed, civilian industries pivoted with astonishing speed. Steel mills roared, shipyards multiplied, airfields bloomed across deserts and farmland. From 1941 to 1945, the United States produced more ships, planes, and vehicles than all Axis powers combined. War became arithmetic, and arithmetic became destiny. The irony is stark. The attack designed to neutralize American power became the catalyst for its expansion. The surprise meant to shock a nation into negotiation instead unified it into relentless mobilization. In trying to control the timeline of war, Japan accelerated its own defeat. Because once the industrial giant stood up, it did not pause, it did not hesitate, it did not negotiate from weakness. It built and built and built until the imbalance became overwhelming. Today, the rusting hulk of the USS Arizona still rests beneath the waters of Pearl Harbor. Oil droplets rise slowly to the surface, what sailors call the black tears. They shimmer quietly in the sunlight, a reminder of a morning of shock, of an admiral who understood the risk, of a gamble that changed the course of history, and of a truth written not in speeches, but in steel. In modern war, the factory can be mightier than the fleet.